live. Good evening, platform viewers. I want to welcome you back to the platform. As usual, we always have something that's thought provoking, that's fun, that's entertaining, and sometimes even serious and heartwarming. But tonight we're having a serious conversation, but lighthearted, about men and masculinity and the state of masculinity in the 21st century. So this is in line with our theme this whole month of June. We've been celebrating men. I'm wearing blue tonight in honor of all our wonderful men that are out there viewing it, and even those who are not viewing us tonight. This is in honor of you. So we are celebrating men in the platform all of this month and continuing with that theme. So tonight we have special guests. We have Mr. Chauncey Reed. If you want to go ahead and wave. All right, Mr. Reed is a husband, a father of two wonderful boys. He's an IT professional and he's a man, right? So he's here. He's
yes, sir.
To speak about this tonight. And then we also have Rashad Rich. Go ahead and wave your hand, Rashad. Wave so we can see you. Okay, great. So Rashad is a Norfolk, Virginia native and a proud new author of the book 10 Hats of a Man. It's available on Amazon and Kindle, by the way. Before graduating from the University of Virginia with his bachelor's in sociology, he accepted Christ as his Lord and Savior and pledged two fraternities. Rashad has chaired a men's ministry and is passionate about Black male development. When he is not helping people with pathways higher education, he enjoys spending time with his wife and children, and he also has a YouTube channel, Aim Next, which showcases the beauty and the creativity of his family. So we want to welcome Mr. Rich and we want to welcome Mr. Reed to the platform this evening. And of course, in always our platform tradition, we want to invite our viewers to chat in your questions or your comments. We want to hear from you. This doesn't make this a conversation without you. So without further delays, I want to turn this over to these distinguished gentlemen I have here tonight. And we're just going to jump in and just start right off. Like, how would you define masculinity? And either one of you can answer.
Chauncey, you want to take the floor first?
So you asked about defining masculinity?
Absolutely. How would you define masculinity? And each of you have a chance to answer.
So I would say that masculinity would be the attributes, behaviors, and roles associated with boys and men in our society. For example, a man is expected to show strength, courage, be assertive, provide for the family, etc., etc.
Mm-hmm.
Good.
Yes. And I want you to feel like there are any right or wrong answers, because I think that's what makes the conversation rich and robust, is because everyone kind of have a different take on these words. Mr. Rashad Rich, what's your take on how would you define masculinity?
All right. Well, thank you, Natalie, for the question. It's easy to answer now, because this is why part of masculinity is knowing when to use your wisdom and discernment. So I let Chauncey go first, so it's easy to just say kudos to everything he just said, and that's my cop-out answer. But I would define it as very similar to Brother Chauncey, in the sense of I think about roles and norms typically characterized with men. So the important words there are typically, and in the characterization of how a man should be. But like Chauncey said, they're talking about behaviors, and in some ways some stereotypes. So how men are supposed to be always tough and not crying. But to sum it up, roles and norms typically characterized with men.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And thanks for sharing that, Rashad. And I think what's so key is I like to always start off with like, well, how do you define it? And I think what you will find out if you just start polling or asking men different things, you might get slightly different answers or the same. And I think what's powerful about masculinity and the opposite, of course, is femininity is connected. And then you all can answer this. Is there an aspect of masculinity that's connected to gender? Is it connected to your maleness, or is it something that you can just you choose, so to speak? Or I guess this the age-old debate, nature versus nurture. So how much is masculinity do you think is gender specific?
I can jump first for this one. I would say, as far as how much of masculinity is gender specific, I would say in some ways it's not. And I say it's not because I look at it as a spectrum. I think we, especially when we think about like pop culture, the reason why we enjoy, Martin Lawrence as Shanae and Tyler Perry as Medea is because men can portray exactly what you said, Natalie, the opposite of femininity. And so watching these males, and, by all stretch of imagination, they're, as masculine, I guess, as we can assume or whatnot, play these more female characters. I think it's amazing how he's spot dead on or whatnot. So I look at it as it's not specific to the male gender, but it's more like a spectrum. There's, we're looking at different variations of what masculinity can look like.
Mm-hmm. And I like that term that you use, a spectrum. Chauncey, what do you think? Do you think masculinity is gender specific?
No, I don't. And the reason I say it's not gender specific is because in my upbringing, the women they showed the strength in the family. My grandfather on my mother's side passed at an early age, as well as my grandfather on my father's side. So the people that exhibited strength in our family were the women. My grandmother was a very strong woman. She was very assertive. She showed strength, same as my mother. My mother raised 9 children, 7 boys. She weighed 125 pounds, but she invoked fear in all of us. And I don't think we realized how small she was back then, but we did not challenge our mother. She was the disciplinarian in the family, and really we owe all to our mother for being where we are today. Thanks to her, we all have been successful because of her leadership and her discipline.
Yeah, and you know what? And I certainly second what you were saying about your mother. I didn't know her personally, but I can know what it's like to experience a strong female presence in the household, and in the family. Very much women become the matriarchs in the family, the grandmothers, the great grandmothers, might be the wife or the mother in the home that really become the matriarchs. And so I'm glad that you brought that up about women and I guess in gender roles, because I wanted to see if I could unpack that with you gentlemen about gender roles. And you mentioned that your mother was the one that was, the strength that if people, your family, your siblings were looking to. How can we explain masculinity in that experience when you're having a female, perhaps dominated family? How do you explain masculinity? How does that roll out in terms of gender roles? I'm throwing it out there.
Oh man, this is a great question, because I actually asked myself this question too when I was writing a book, and my attempt at it was my mother. So I was predominantly raised by a single mother, but I say again predominantly, so having these qualifiers, because my dad actually was in my life. It's just, the marriage didn't work out, they separated, but he made a point to still be there to help raise us or whatever. So the way I kind of learned about it through my mom was actually by opposites. So she would tell me, like, don't no woman want a man that can't cook, or don't no woman want a man that don't know how to do any chores or is useless or whatever. So I learned about what a man is by finding out what he isn't, and what what's going to be attractive to females and ladies or whatever. So she kind of taught me that way, as well as like I said, my dad was still around, so he taught me in his own way. But again, we have this generational thing sometimes in the Black community where our fathers are not there, and so he was trying to be the best father he could be based on what he knew. And again, youth, a lot of, when you're young, you're ignorant to a lot of things, and parenthood is for real is a trial and error thing. There's no playbook that they give to you that's going to be perfect. Every child is different. Every parent is different. So having his influence, as well as my uncles, and my mother is one of 10. So I had a bunch of uncles in my life, her brothers, as well as she was in the military. So, that's a male dominated occupation. So having her friends come off the ship and hang out with her, I kind of saw what they were doing. So as far as my matriarch, I learned about masculinity up from like what's opposite, and then learned about the vices too. I'll yield the floor to Chauncey.
And mentioned that, Rashad, I'm sorry to cut you off, Chauncey, but I also neglected to share with our viewers that Chauncey is also a veteran. So he's also, we thank you for your service to our country. And so, yes, I wanted to make sure I wanted to make sure the world knew that you also were a veteran, and I apologize for leaving that off. Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
So I think growing up with my mother, my father was in the home, but he suffered from alcoholism. So when he was sober, he was kind of checked out. He only exhibited these characteristics of masculinity when he was intoxicated. And when he was intoxicated, it wasn't good. He was yelling, cursing, being dominant over my mother, using expletives. That's when we saw in the physical violence, that's when we saw the masculinity come out. But when he was sober, it's almost as if he wasn't there. And so my mother ran the day-to-day operations of the household. She disciplined us. She taught us how to wash clothes, how to cook at a very early age. I've been getting up at 7 a.m. in the morning since forever. I probably couldn't sleep to 8 a.m. in the morning because my mother would whip you out of the bed on Saturday if you didn't get up by 7 a.m. because she had already cooked breakfast. And so how that has impacted me in my adulthood is I don't necessarily look for a woman to perform certain roles in the household, right? Because that wasn't how I was brought up. I don't necessarily expect my wife to wash the clothes. I can wash clothes just as well as she can. I know how to get up on Saturdays and cook breakfast. So based on my upbringing, there aren't clearly defined gender roles in my experience. But also with that, as a man, for me in my life, there were struggles as to how I am supposed to lead a family with not having a male role model growing up. Mm-hmm. Right? I was used to the woman being dominant in the family. So now I have struggles. I've had struggles in relationships, finding my role as what I should be doing as the man in the family, how I should be leading the family. Mm-hmm. I mean, I definitely know that I'm a provider. I know that, I protect my family. I take care of them. I always look for their well-being, but I never had an example growing up from a man as to how I am to behave as a man or express my masculinity within my family.
Sister Natalie, can I jump in on that?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
All right. So Chauncey, again, thank you for your service, sir. And I wanted to raise a few things that you actually mentioned just from your background about how you said your father, when he was sober, was checked out. But then when he had the what I call liquid courage or whatnot, he exerted his masculinity. And oftentimes you were saying it was explicitives being yelled, a dominance over your mother or whatnot. And so I want to raise up this notion or this concept of toxic masculinity. So toxic masculinity. In what you saw, and I'm not a licensed clinical psychologist or anything, but I imagine that you looked at that as that's not the example that I want to follow, and that's not a role model, because that was masculinity, but that was masculinity probably in the wrong direction. It's still masculinity, but it's like I said, it's toxic. It's not a growth. When I think about men, and especially family guys, family men, they're supposed to be growing not only their spouses, their wives, but their children as well. So it's supposed to be growth. And we're talking about fertilization. We're talking about rich soil and not anything toxic where there's going to be, degradation or some type of retardation or whatnot. So I wanted to just touch on that a little bit, that masculinity, you got hyper masculinity, you got toxic masculinity, and then you got the what Chauncey and I shared already about the norms and the behaviors of just, I guess you would say, the acceptable masculinity.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And you know what? And I think there were so many profound things that both of you lifted up. And I wanted to see if we can unpack that a little bit, because coming from a place of just watching, even in my own upbringing, families that I knew, friends, and seeing this same story, different actors playing out in so many different families in different parts of the country within the Black community and abroad. And those who are tuning in, we certainly don't want to put out the information as if, dysfunctional families is only unique to African American families, because it's not. There are many other families who are going through or have experienced that void, that absence of their father, and then in many different races and ethnicities. And so we certainly want to make sure that that's not what's coming across. But in focusing on the African American community, I've seen that story play out so many times, where the male figure in the home is completely gone and absent. They never knew who their father was, or They were there, but they were checked out for one reason or another. Where they were dealing with addiction, they were dealing with, whatever it is, fill in the blank, and they were checked out. How do we shape, or as not as in we, because I'm a woman, but as in men, in thinking about the next generation and those coming behind you and those now under your own tutelage, because both of you are fathers and parents now, how do you shape that if you didn't have it yourself and you're trying to figure it out? And I know it's a loaded question.
So,
Johnson. Go ahead, Rashad.
No, sir, you got it.
Well, I will say that when I joined the military, I experienced a lot of role models that were African American, which in the small world I lived in, I didn't even know it existed. I saw a lot of professional Black men that had upstanding character, values, family men. I just had never seen that in my life, and I really didn't know that it existed. And so I learned as much as I could from those role models. As far as dealing, as far as raising my kids, I just try to be the best father I can be. I try not to make the same mistakes that my father made. I try to be aware of my actions and how, just how I'm interacting with my kids. Try to be aware of my behaviors and ensuring that I'm giving them a space where they feel comfortable expressing themselves, because that's something that I didn't have. Making it okay, just making things okay for them to express their feelings, letting them know that it's okay if they want to cry. Just making things acceptable that typically weren't acceptable for me as a child growing up. Like, it was looked down upon to express emotions, to cry, to show weakness, things of that nature. And I just want their upbringing to be opposite of mine, and just give them a healthy environment to grow up in.
Absolutely. Rashad, what do you think?
Man, like it's hard to follow behind Chauncey, so I think I'm gonna go the next 5 questions. I'm gonna go in front of him. But absolutely everything that he just said, I think him and I are on that same wavelength, in the sense that I don't want my children's childhood to be necessarily opposite, because I actually enjoyed my childhood, everything from the divorce of my parents to when they were married, to all the highs, lows, and all the in-betweens. But I do, as any parent, want their childhood to be better. So I want to take the good from my childhood experiences and then increase those and magnify those. And so, in some ways, everything I do actually is for my future grandchildren. So, according to the faith that we subscribe to in the book that we subscribe to, that's our whole goal as men, is always to be providing for our children's children. And so from writing a book to, creating a YouTube channel, it's all about showing my current children their possibilities, and to say that, hey, masculinity is fluid, and you're not supposed to be pigeonholed into a box when it comes to masculinity. If I want to hug and kiss you. That's what I'm gonna do as a father, and there's no shame in that. If I want to tell you that I love you, there is no shame in that. Like Chauncey said, doing chores. I mean, I do dishes, I do iron my clothes, everything. Like Chauncey was saying, not to say that you know, my wife is incapable of doing it or whatever, but this is things that I grew up doing, so I just continue to do it. I was like, we don't have any ladies in our house, so everybody pulls their own weight.
I like that. No slaves in the house.
No, not at all. Not at all. Not if you want a happy household, you don't have any slaves. If you try to turn into a slave, they go up to you. And you know, your wife or whatever, if she ain't happy, ain't nobody happy. So I mean,
yeah,
amen,
that's right,
brother. Amen, brother.
No slaves in this
like,
household.
no slaves in the house. No slaves in the house.
At all.
And I'm throwing this out there, and please, our viewers, if you're viewing us, we want to hear from you. Please chat in your questions or your comments. We're talking about the state of masculinity in the 21st century, and we have two distinguished gentlemen here who are unpacking this for us and helping us lead this conversation, Mr. Rashard Rich and Mr. Chauncey Reed. And then going back to what you were saying, Rashard, about masculinity being fluid, and you know, hugging and kissing your boys without shame and not feeling like something is wrong with that. And I applaud that. Do you all think that the way you have played out your masculinity and now as fathers, as adults, would have been different had your fathers in your lives displayed that healthy masculinity for you? Do you think that would have made you a little bit different, or how?
Yeah, I would jump in. Like I said, I'm gonna jump in before Chauncey now. But I think for me, I would have just discovered this this level of manhood a lot sooner. Had you know, I had more positive reinforcement of masculinity with my dad. Is not to say that it wasn't there, but like, you know, a lot of things I had to discover on my own. You know, in some ways, I keep going back to social media because in some ways, social media is kind of helping to raise the men that we see. So from music industry to film to YouTube, I tell people without shame that if I want to learn how to change my oil, I now go to YouTube because these are things I didn't learn, you know, necessarily from my father. And if I want to learn how to balance a checkbook or something, or invest in stocks, I go to the internet, YouTube. I ask Siri, Cortana, and Galaxy, and all these other, you know, strong female virtual assistants that are helping to raise us men out here. So, yeah, you know, if I'd have had those healthy interactions a lot sooner, I would have just been the man I am today, probably in my 20s. But I think we're all on a divine path that, especially if you're subscribing and a person of faith, that what's for you is for you. And so inevitably I was going to be where I was going to be, but it just would have been a lot sooner.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I like that. Chauncey, what are your thoughts on that? I know Rashard jumped in there first this time.
Well, I think if my father had played more of a role in my upbringing, that I wouldn't have had the failed relationships that I had in the past. So with him, you know, mentally not being there, you know, he really wasn't teaching me how to be a man, what was expected of me as a man, what my role should be in the family. These were all things that, you know, I was yearning from him to teach me those things. And so because he was absent, you know, I had many failed relationships before I finally found the one in Andrea Johnson. and then after we married since 2013. But it definitely was a struggle for me in my relationships because of his absence.
Mm-hmm.
Can I jump in on that word? I love when. Go ahead.
Absolutely.
I love when Chauncey goes, because I always think of other great things, especially from what he shares. Chauncey, I love the word that you use. I was yearning. And I don't want to overlook that word. I think words are important, just like Black Lives Matter, words matter as well. And that yearning, if you look up that word without having Webster handy in front of me, it's just a strong desire, a strong passion, or a necessity. So you needed that almost as probably, I would imagine, almost like you needed air and like you needed food and water or whatever. So to say that I was yearning as a young boy to get that, I think that is so important. And I think about that for myself or whatnot. So just a little bit more about my history and my background. Like I said, words are important. So there's a difference between a father and a dad. Sometimes they're used interchangeably, but like Sister Natalie said, if you come from a family that's a little mixed, or what some would call dysfunctional or extended, or whatever you want to call blended or whatever. I have actually a stepdad and a biological father. And so the one that I've been, sharing the most stories about is actually my stepdad. So that's the one that pretty much raised me to the man I am today. My biological father, that's a different story. He was actually there. So it wasn't like he was like trying to be distant and disown me or whatever. It's just, he has his own life with a new wife or whatnot. And then we're living in a different state. So he did what he could from a distance. And I have to give him that as my biological father, but also giving props to my dad in the sense that, it really matters as far as making sure we kind of distinguish those words. And so I'll leave it there so we can discuss other things.
No, but I think you bring up, and I think it's important that you give an honor to the men that's poured into your life, biological or otherwise, because honor is important. And now that you are both her fathers, and you are a product of what you didn't have and what you did have. And I think it was you, that Rashad, that said earlier that you learn about what masculinity is by what it isn't from your mother, from that mother figure coming like, no man was supposed to do this, man ain't supposed to do that, And so what key things, now that you having a chance to raise your own children or boys, what key things are you trying to make sure that they grasp while they're under your tutelage before they get launched into adulthood?
Man, big ups to the military. Like Chauncey said, values. Like when Chauncey mentioned the military, he said he saw men of value. So the biggest thing I can give my children, besides wealth and, trying to break that generational poverty or whatever, is instilling in them values to eventually make the right decisions. So, values drive your beliefs, it drives your actions. And so for me, and I hate to make this sound like a shameless plug, but like really, I wrote this book for myself. First and foremost, this book is a reminder to myself of my commitment as a father, as a brother, as a son, as all the different hats and roles that I play. But in that book, I actually put the values that I want my children to learn in there, so it's plain. So if they ever say, "Hey, something happens to me prematurely," and they say, "Hey, I'm kind of forgetting Daddy's words," hopefully they can get that from their mother. If not from their mother, they can read it and hear my voice. That I want them to have wisdom. I want them to have, a proper attitude. It's okay to have an attitude, but you don't want to be overly aggressive and overly masculine or whatnot. I want them to know that there's going to be temptation in life, and you gotta, use discernment in order to run away from those temptations. I want them to know about integrity. I want them to learn about leadership. Like Chauncey said, he saw men in roles of leadership and role models or whatever. So I want them to have those same values, similar from the military, because I was raised in a military family. And so learning from my mother, Black female in the military, she's in the minority there. I learned a lot. My dad as well. Again, he was in the military. That's how he and my mother met or whatnot. And so learning the values from the military, from them, but also just a man of faith. I'm trying to make sure that they are able to dissect the word properly. So not that I have a license or anything to be officially able to dissect it, but just as their father to say, hey, this is how I'm interpreting this phrase or this scripture or whatnot. And this is how I'm applying it. As you grow older, you might disagree. You might find a new interpretation for yourself. But let's talk about that, because eventually you will be a man and you will be a woman or whatnot. And so I want to treat them with the respect that they deserve, but also showing them how to respect others.
Absolutely. And I think that is so powerful, all those things that you share. Chauncey, I want to give you a chance to respond before I jump on in there. What key things or values are you trying to impart to your sons, your boys, drawn from your own experience growing up, what you had, what you didn't have? What key things are you trying to impart to them and building masculinity and shaping it for them?
I just want my boys to be secure in who they are, and just to know that they're enough. That they don't have to be anything more than they are to be accepted. And I just want them to be leaders, to do their own thing, not follow everyone else, but do their own thing, be leaders, and just be confident in who they are. And so I think if you're comfortable in your own skin and you don't have a lot of insecurities, that goes a long way to being successful.
Absolutely. And so in thinking about all these wonderful traits that you're trying to pass on to your own children and want them to embody, how much do you think, it makes me think about nurture versus nature, or choices in shaping masculinity, and that you're pulling traits from your values to impart to your children, and how much choice actually has a place in shaping the masculinity of children, of boys as they grow up. And as a lighthearted example, if you like, what, son, if you want to wear, pink, wear pink proudly, that does not make you less of a man. If you want to embrace your best friend, your brother, give him a kiss, that does not make you homosexual or less than a man. How much are these kind of practical day-to-day actions or behaviors are we shaping, or are you shaping for your sons or your children, and how much does choice actually weigh in on the way you're shaping and molding masculinity in your children? And anyone can answer. I know it's a lot.
Well, I would say choice, shapes childhood and masculinity a whole lot. I look at choice as the outward display of your masculinity. And, growing up in this global world that we live in now, where we can see other cultures, I think it's important to see what masculinity looks like, because we are the human race and we are men. And male by sex or whatever, but looking at other cultures and how they display masculinity, kind of what you said, Sister Natalie, about the color pink. For October, for American football, that's what the choice. And we as men, we wear that to represent breast cancer awareness. But I remember the rapper Cameron used to wear pink and made it fashionable. I mean, he had a pink bandana, pink fur coat. And you know, he had the jewelry and he was all dripped out and swagged or whatever, ballerific. But nobody questioned his manhood, or maybe people did question it, but they do it to his face or whatever. I think about Willow Smith, and I think about Kanye. I think about MC Hammer in the sense of fashion. So when you think about masculinity, I think about what to wear. And so in Scotland, men wear kilts, and kilts, if you know, is a skirt for all intents and purposes. It's not like a dress that goes to your ankles. It's a skirt that's pretty much above the knees. From a anatomy standpoint, I can see why. I mean, we have a middle appendage or whatnot. So when I think about freedom for the male appendage, I was like, oh crap, you know what? A kilt makes sense because, you know, not to get too graphic or whatever, but when I think about jeans, the pants we wear, skinny jeans and stuff like that in America, I was like, that's who pick a side, is this or that, left or right. I was like, the appendage is in the middle. Like, why do we have to pick a side? So anyway, not to get too graphic because we want to stay PG. But masculinity looks different depending on different cultures, and I imagine Scotland's not the only one that wears a kilt or some type of free-flowing apparel. Because when I think about you know, biblical characters, and I cannot recall what the name of the garment is, but the robes and the gowns were pretty much free-flowing, and they didn't have that choice of choosing left or right. And I think about the pharaohs or whatnot, and kind of what they wore as that might have looked like a skirt or a kilt or whatever. So, you know, I bring up MC Hammer and Kanye because you had the parachute pants, and hopefully nobody judged MC Hammer. You have Kanye where he wore like a leather kilt or whatnot. You got Willow, like you have different versions of masculinity. And so in raising my children, I let go, like you wear the clothes don't wear you. So that's important to remember. You wear the clothes don't wear you. So, you know, for those overly masculine men, I heard a couple of those people say that, don't let this pink shirt fool you. Like, this pink shirt can come off, and I can let you know outside just how much of a man I really am or whatever. So, you know, when we look at these American football players, professional football players, don't let the fact that they got pink on their shoes and pink gloves or whatever fool you, because they can run a 4.2 or a 4.3 or whatever. They can bench press just like any bodybuilder or whatever. So when you think of masculinity, you're like, okay, well, you know, I don't want to go up to that brother and say, oh, you look kind of such and such in your pink today, because you don't know what might happen. So.
That's right. So you don't want to take that risk. And it's and I think it's so, I like the examples that you use of the different individuals like in pop culture, and not to throw a monkey wrench in, but I actually thought about Prince, the late Prince, the purple one, I like to call him. You know, he was a masculine man, but he also had some effeminate kind of things that he embraced, you know. We're not going to go too much into Prince. He was a wonderful artist and a man, and God rest his soul. But he was, you know, he didn't embody stereotypical masculinity. But at the same time, no one really questioned if this man is masculine or not. You know, is he masculine or not? Is it, you know, and he really pushed the limit, I think, the cultural norms of what masculinity could look like. And he even took on some more quote unquote effeminate apparel, or the way he chose to wear his hair or whatever. But, you know, we loved him. People didn't think he was less of a man. It was Prince. So I love that you bring those examples in there. And I think I really think it's challenging us, and viewers, correct me if I'm wrong. We want to hear from you. Please chat in your questions or your comments. It's challenging stereotypes that we place on men and what is supposed to be masculine. Where do we draw the line? Is there a visible line? Is it just purely choice, purely nurture, and we can choose how we express ourselves? Or is there a line there? Is it biological linked line where it's like, you know what, no, that's really not masculinity, that crosses the line, that's not, we're rejecting that. Is there really a line? What do you think?
Oh, you want me to go?
Yeah, we're gonna let you go.
Um, I don't think so. I don't think there's a line that you set and say, hey, you got to stay. There's no box that you're put in, and where society says, well, if you don't check each of these blocks, then you're not masculine. I think every day society continues to evolve. So when we understand better, then we do better. So I don't think there's a particular line that's drawn that defines whether or not.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to respectfully disagree.
Okay.
All right, and the reason why is because I was wrestling with this before tonight's discussion, because when you take away the norms, the roles, the outward expressions, clothes, dialect thing, whatever, the only real thing I can say that distinguishes us as men from the women is sexuality, is our attraction. So if you were to take away our attraction to females, and I might get in some hot water with this, but that's the great thing about discussion and debate, that everybody is not going to be agreeing with everything you say. When you take away everything else, the only thing we have is our attractions to our sisters and our queens or whatnot. And without that, then the line is so blurred that it's almost like no distinction, barring anatomy or whatnot. The fact that, we're supposed to procreate, we're supposed to give birth, and men are not. That's the only thing. But when we think about our transgender community and identifying as a male, or in having masculine traits of masculinity and taking testosterone pills and things of that nature, when you take away that biological, basically, the male anatomy and that attraction, that's the line right there. Once that line is gone and men can start giving birth, then it's all gone from there.
Mm-hmm. And I thank you for sharing that. And we had just turning to our viewers, we had a viewer that typed in, the line is subjective and based on the individual. And I know, Rashad, that you were respectfully challenging that notion that, there isn't a line, or it's all subjective. We also have a viewer that had it in, oh, go forth and multiply. Go forth and multiply, right? And then another viewer typed in, I believe different generations view masculinity differently. Do you all want to comment on these comments that came in?
Well, I know where the says God and the go forth and multiply, I know where that one's coming from. And like I said, I see the other comment in regards to, I believe different generations view masculinity different, which is true. I mean, if you ask, Chauncey and I's prior generation, what was masculinity all about? Just like he shared that example of his father, he might say being in the house, but mentally and emotionally checked out. So he would say, as a father or as a man, I was there for my kids. You can't say I wasn't in the house. But, Chauncey just shared that mentally and emotionally, he was not there. So, different, they're absolutely right in the sense that different generations will define it differently, and it will continue to be defined differently. But I think when we talk about that line, it's hard to really debate that go forth and multiply, because without that, procreation and that sexuality and that attraction, then yeah, we're all just human race species, but we're defined by what we can do biologically with our anatomy. So I'll leave it there.
Yeah, and I think you listen up, that we're not this homogenous asexual. There are some lines there. There are some lines of distinction, and I think what this is lifting up is: do you think, and either one of you can respond, that we're confused, that maybe men, boys, we speak a platform of here in American culture, African American culture. Are we confused about what masculinity or healthy masculinity is supposed to be? And I know you brought up Willow and what's his other? Oh my gosh, I'm drawing a blank. Will Smith's other son.
I got Jaden. Is it Jaden?
Jaden, yes, Jaden. I was thinking about Jaden, and Jaden was modeling, like, we would call quote unquote female clothes at one point in his career and things. And then I think Willow came out and said that she has some term, and I'm so sorry, I'm drawing a blank, but she's not really saying I'm not heterosexual, I'm not homosexual, I'm not saying I'm identifying with LGBTQ, but I'm kind of, whatever makes sense in a moment, or whatever energy matches my energy. And it's kind of nebulous almost. It's like, not really having this definition. So are we really confused about what masculinity or maleness is? I'll let you collect your thoughts.
I want to yield the floor to Chauncey first, but I want to do a correction because I think you just helped correct me. Willow is the daughter, and Jaden, I believe, is the son. So I think I said that wrong first time. So I want to credit, no disrespect to Will Smith and Jada and their children or whatnot. So just clearing the air. But Chauncey, I'll yield to you.
I mean, I think it just depends on the person. My understanding and definition of masculinity may be totally different from that of Will Smith's. So I'm going to teach my kids differently from him. I'm not going to recommend that my sons wear, skirts or dresses. I just don't believe in that. Will Smith, he raises his kids in a different way, and that's his prerogative. So it's my job to teach my kids, the best way I know how to be masculine. And I think where the lines could become confused is, the information that kids may gather on social media. So that's, and a lot of times, parents are good role models for their kids, but a lot of times they're influenced by their peers. So when my kids get, as they grow older, the peers are going to play a larger role in their perception of things. And so that may be where the lines do start to become confusing, but it won't be coming from me. So that's my take on it.
Yeah, and following behind, I don't know if we have a confusion of masculinity, kind of like, what was already said, that there's different ways to interpret it and different ways to define it. And so, like Chauncey was saying, Brother Chauncey, is based on the individual and the parent. But I do want to acknowledge the fact that, like he said, society will sanction and validate this journey of manhood and masculinity. So if we just keep going with the example of wearing a dress or a kilt or whatever, If we were to do that in America, society is going to frown upon that. So you're going to get sanctioned. People are going to look at you like, what is going on? Why are you doing that? You're going to get questioned, this, that, and the third. But when you play like an aggressive sport, or you wear skinny jeans, or you wear just regular jeans, society is going to validate that and say, oh, you look good in those jeans. Or, oh, you look good playing that basketball. Because I noticed that we don't have very many male cheerleaders. And then, I joked with my friends a couple of times, the ones that, don't really take life too seriously, about how we look at American football as the masculine sport. And then we got male cheerleading as the feminine sport or whatever. But I was like, you know what? I was like, when you break it down, I mean, bodies touching bodies, slapping people on the butt, and I'm breaking it down to a very simplistic standpoint. I was like, there's some tendencies that, don't really align with, that machismo or whatever. But then when you think about male cheerleading, you get to touch girls, appropriately. You get to support women in the different stances and, pyramid schemes or whatever they're doing. And I was like, you're around females more. So it in some ways, I was like, I don't know why we don't value as a society being around women more and having that, attraction versus, the hitting and contact and instead of giving a high five, you got to slap them on the butt or whatnot. It's just, like Chauncey says, to each his own, and it's a little different flavor for, different taste buds.
Yes, absolutely. And this is, it's hard to imagine that this conversation has been so good. We're getting down to the bottom of the hour, but I wanted to make sure I lift up this question to kind of round off our discussion. And of course, we can possibly unpack this whole topic thoroughly in just an hour. We can just scrape the surface of it. But what can church or a community of believers do to support healthy masculinity and not creating, supporting stereotypes, these masculine or an extreme, an effeminate or opposite kind of view of masculinity, or soften down, if you will. What can the church do or the community of faith do to support that healthy growth of masculinity?
I'll go ahead. I just think the church and the community, they can support healthy masculinity by being examples for our young men to follow, and just teaching young boys and men that there are certain boundaries that they shouldn't cross. Just basically teaching them right from wrong. Right, so training them up in the way they should. That's my take.
I mean, because you and I subscribe to the same book, you took the words right out of my mouth. It's just train them up in the way they must go so they won't depart. When I was a child, I did childish things, and when I became a man, I put away those childish things and did as a man. So rough paraphrasing. But the three things I would say: prayer, mentorship. So, men training men raising men, men supporting men, kind of like Brother Chauncey just said, and discipleship. So making sure they understand the word and that foundation. So their way there is no confusion. Because from the church, what the church can do is help instill those values that Brother Chauncey and I are doing with our very own children. Those are biblical sound principles. So just the church can help with the discipleship, with the mentorship, and ultimately prayer, because although children will stray, if you have that foundation, they'll come back to it every time. So if that foundation is solid, they're going to go out, they're going to live life. The world is going to challenge them. The internet is always going to be there. They're always going to have a friend that says, well, why not try this? And, you know, as fleshly people, as humans or whatnot, we're going to stumble. We're going to make mistakes. But ultimately, you want to come back to that anchor, be anchored in the word.
Absolutely.
Great points, Jerome. I mean, Rashad.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, you know, and just in summary, and I thank you all, and I want to thank both of you, Rashad and Chauncey, for being vulnerable, for being transparent, for coming and sharing your truth, and really challenging us to think differently about what masculinity is and how that manifests itself in our day-to-day lives, practically, also in the culture, and how we, in our lens, and how we view the culture. And for those viewers who were chatting, we appreciate your comments and your questions, chatting them in. You really have added to this discussion, and I want to acknowledge you and thank you. But in summary, I think I took the moment to make note of these things that you all want to impart to your children. And I want to just take a moment and share those things again to our viewers, so they may be blessed and may think about this. And as they're raising their own children, or thinking about raising their children, or even if they're mentoring other young guys, young boys in the community, think about imparting these things. Wisdom, good attitude, discernment, that they are enough, leaders in leadership, integrity, faith, not being followers, and being confident in who they are. And you all have done a fantastic job. And I thank you for being wonderful men who are shaping and defining and changing what masculinity is for the good and for the in a healthy sense. And so I applaud you both for raising your children and doing what you can do to bring up the next generation of masculine men, healthy men that have responsibility for their own homes, but also in their community. So I want to applaud you all for that. And all the men out there listening here from the platform, we thank you for your contribution of being a father, as being a man, a citizen out there. We celebrating all men all this month on the platform. We thank you so much. We honor men, and we thank God for you, for all of you out there. So I thank you for tuning in. I want to thank our guests again, Rashad Rich and Chauncey Reed, for joining us on the platform this evening. And as usual, we'll be back next Monday at 7:30. Until we meet again, be blessed to be a blessing. And remember that you are stronger than you know. And your influence it reverberates to everyone that you touch. And so be encouraged. We thank you for tuning in. Until next week, have a good evening.